Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're trying something ambitious, mapping a life that seems almost impossible, just filled with these radical shifts. We're looking at the source material on Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It really is more than just mapping it out, isn't it? It feels like we're trying to, well, reverse engineer this incredible blueprint for ambition he created. Our mission today is to get under the hood, understand the core engine, that relentless drive that let him hit the top in, what, 4 totally different worlds? Bodybuilding, acting, business, politics.
Yeah, and when you just look at the basic facts, it's kind of mind-blowing. Born July 30, 1947, Thal, Austria. Dual citizen. And the list of jobs.
Yeah.
Actor, bodybuilder, businessman, politician, author. I mean, the immediate thing you grasp is that, well, the normal way was never going to cut it for him.
That's precisely it. That's the core idea. We really need to examine his life in these 4 distinct acts because, honestly, each one demanded a total reinvention. New identity, new skills, new goals, everything. So, Act 1. The Austrian Oak, literally billing himself.
Then Act 2, right, the action star where he had to smash through Hollywood's walls.
Exactly. Then Act 3, the mogul. And this is key, getting rich first. And finally, Act 4, the governor, turning that global fame into actual political power.
Okay, let's dive straight into Act I then. The Austrian Oak, forging a champion. It seems like the whole foundation, the entire blueprint, really starts with his childhood.
Yeah.
A situation that was so much about fitting in, maybe even trauma, that just escaping became the main driver.
Oh, absolutely. That background is critical. He grows up in Thal, small town, post-war Austria, strict Catholic family, very disciplined. His father, Gustav, was the local police chief. And the historical layer here is, well, it's significant. Gustav joined the Nazi Party and the SA back in '38, served in the war, got wounded at Stalingrad.
Wow. So you've got that history plus the really rigid social structure of Austria recovering from the war. It sounds like a pressure cooker from day one. He talked later, quite openly, about what he flat out called child abuse, getting hit with belts, hair pulled, just this constant background fear. But the psychological stuff with his father seems almost more powerful as a motivator.
Yeah, the sources point to this really difficult dynamic. The father showed, quote, strong and blatant favoritism towards Arnold's older brother, Meinhard. Arnold apparently felt it was because Gustav suspected he wasn't his biological son.
That's rough.
It is. And that lack of validation, plus that whole post-war culture demanding everyone just conform, it just lit this fire under him to become someone completely different. Success wasn't just desirable, it was the only way out he could see.
And the light bulb moment seems to be around age 15. His soccer coach takes the team to a gym. He sees pictures of guys like Reg Park, Steve Reeves, bodybuilders.
Yeah.
And he realized this isn't just a sport. This is maybe an international ticket, something individual, something that could get him out of Austria.
Precisely. Bodybuilding was like the perfect rebellion tool for him. It was measurable, you know, he could control it. Totally different from the kind of arbitrary rules and emotional messiness at home. Every single workout, every bit of muscle he built was a step towards owning himself.
And he just went all in, chose bodybuilding over soccer, boom, just like that. The dedication he showed, even as a teenager, it's the stuff of legend. We're talking like breaking into the local gym when it was closed on weekends just so he wouldn't miss a workout.
Yeah.
He said he felt physically sick if he missed one.
And that laser focus, that obsession with a single goal, that's the pattern we see again and again through all 4 acts. It started paying off pretty fast, too. Won Junior Mr. Europe in 1965. And get this, he was doing his mandatory year in the Austrian army at the time.
Right, and didn't he go AWOL for that competition?
He did. Went AWOL, competed, won, and then spent a week in military prison for it. But as he always framed it, winning titles like Mr. Universe later on, that was his ticket to America, he saw the path.
And he cashed that ticket in October 1968. Lands in the U.S., he's 21, barely speaks English, and heads straight for the Mecca, Gold's Gym in Venice, California.
He was a sponge, learned quickly. Just 2 years later, in 1970, he wins his first Mr. Olympia. He was 23, still the youngest ever to win it. Eventually racked up 7 titles in total. That puts him tied for second most all time, only behind Ronnie Coleman and Lee Haney, who both got 8.
But the peak, or maybe the most talked about moment of his bodybuilding career, has to be that 1980 Mr. Olympia comeback. It's still debated today, isn't it?
Oh, hugely controversial. He'd been retired for 5 years, but he was training for the movie Conan the Barbarian, you know, running, horse riding, sword fighting, into amazing shape, and basically decided almost last minute to enter the Olympia again, secretly.
With only, what, 7 weeks of actual contest prep?
Exactly, 7 weeks. And he won. But the decision just exploded in the bodybuilding world. To really get why, You need the lingo. Conditioning. Back then, conditioning meant muscle density, how sharp the definition was, no water retention. A lot of people, including competitors like Mike Mentzer, felt Arnold just wasn't there. They thought his muscle mass was down and his conditioning looked, well, soft compared to the others.
So the argument was he won basically on his fame, his aura, the narrative, not purely on the physique that day.
That was the feeling, yeah. The backlash was intense. Some guys, Mentzer included, actually quit competing after that. They felt the judging was too subjective, too biased towards Schwarzenegger the star.
It's an early sign of him understanding how to use fame, isn't it? Even in a sport that's supposed to be all about the physical evidence.
A crucial lesson. The win was less about comparing biceps and more about him stamping his authority back onto the sport, reasserting himself as the icon.
Before we move off this phase, we should probably just touch on the sheer physical presence. He was listed at 6 foot 2 inches tall, though people have argued about that height over the years. Contest weight around 235 pounds. Chest, 57 inches. Arms, 22 inches. Just massive numbers.
And you can't forget, he wasn't just about looks. He had serious strength underneath, that powerlifting background. He won a stone lifting contest in Munich, lifting a 560-pound stone off the ground. That's incredible. His reported lifts, like a 683-pound deadlift, 520-pound bench press.
These are serious strength numbers, not just bodybuilding stats.
And we have to address it, the ethics question. The sources do confirm he used anabolic steroids. But it's important context, right? They were legal back then in 1977 when he acknowledged it.
Right. And his claim was specific. He used them for muscle maintenance while dieting down for a show to keep the size he'd already built, not necessarily to pack on new muscle during that phase. It was a completely different landscape regarding performance enhancers then. But yeah, it's part of the story of how that physique was achieved. It really speaks to the lengths he'd go to, the sheer will to build this powerful, nonconformist image, literally building it from scratch to escape his past.
Precisely. He created the physical commodity.
Okay, so that physical commodity becomes the launch pad for Act Two. The Hollywood star transcending the accent. He had the body, the ticket to America. Now, he needed the fame and fortune ticket. But Hollywood initially just slammed the door in his face, right?
Slammed it hard. Agents told him point blank, body's too weird, name's too long, accent's funny. The feedback was just brutal. You have no chance.
And those first few roles didn't exactly help.
Yeah.
Hercules in New York in 1970. A bit of a mess. They billed him as Arnold Strong. And his accent was so thick they had dub over all his lines.
Yeah, not a great start for someone driven to be recognized on his own terms. But there was a glimmer. He actually won a Golden Globe for New Star of the Year for a film called Stay Hungry and 70 Sykes. So maybe people saw something there, some charisma, even if the industry didn't know what box to put him in.
The game changer wasn't an acting coach, though. He was a documentary crew. Pumping Iron in 1977. That film just solidified his image, didn't it? Made him this, philosophical, charming, maybe a bit cocky, but totally magnetic figure. Way more than just muscles.
Absolutely. Pumping Iron didn't just show bodybuilding. It launched him as a global personality. It gave him the leverage to kind of sidestep the usual gatekeepers who were hung up on the accent. Suddenly, producers saw dollar signs attached to that unique charisma he had.
Which led straight to the breakthrough. Conan the Barbarian in 1982, huge hit. Proved his physical presence alone could carry a big movie.
And then, just 2 years later, lightning strikes with James Cameron's The Terminator, 1984. That role was genius because it turned all his supposed weaknesses into strengths. The physique was essential for the cyborg, the kind of robotic, minimal emotion delivery. Made the accent sound intentional, almost cool, not a liability.
I'll be back. 3 words. Instantly iconic.
Exactly. That was the signature role. Launched the catchphrase, launched multiple sequels. It just cemented him.
And that kicked off the golden era, right? The 80s and 90s action hero. Huge blockbusters, Commando, Predator, Total Recall, True Lies. And we absolutely have to talk about the rivalry with Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, yeah, it was central. The sources make it clear they were in this constant one-upmanship game. Bigger guns, higher body counts on screen, crazier stunts. Reportedly, they were genuinely competitive about it. It wasn't just friendly competition. It was about dominating the action genre that Arnold, in many ways, had helped define.
But then came the really smart move, the strategic pivot, comedy. He had to show he could do more. And the way he did it for Twins in 1988 was, frankly, brilliant from a business perspective. He took no salary up front.
Hold on, let's pause on that because it's huge. No salary. For a star of his magnitude, that decision tells you everything about his business mind, which we'll get into more next. He didn't just want the part. He structured the deal to maximize his potential return based on the film's success.
He bet on himself, took a percentage of the profits instead.
And it paid off massively. It ended up being his biggest single payday ever up to that point, reportedly over $40 million. More importantly, it proved he could open a comedy. It opened the door for films like Kindergarten Cop, bringing in a whole new audience, families even.
His absolute peak at the box office probably came with Terminator 2, Judgment Day in 1991, highest grossing film of the year. Critics finally started to get it, didn't they? That his success wasn't accidental. It was about finding roles that played to his strengths, his physique, his voice, instead of fighting against them.
Exactly. He found the formula. There was a brief period where he experimented a bit, directed an episode of Tales from the Crypt, a TV movie called Christmas in Connecticut. But then things started to cool off a bit after Batman and Robin in '97, which was critically panned, and he had a back injury around then too.
And then came Act 4, the biggest interruption yet. He basically stepped back from leading roles completely while he was governor of California from 2003 to 2011. Just did a few cameos here and there.
Right. His proper return to the big screen didn't happen until after he left office, came back in 2011, and his first leading role in about a decade was The Last Stand in 2013.
And since then, she's actually adapted pretty well to how media has changed. Did the Escape Plan movies with Stallone, more Terminator stuff, obviously. And just recently, in 2023, he did his first ever lead role in a TV series, that Netflix action comedy Fubar. Plus, the big documentary about his life, Arnold. He just keeps finding new ways to stay relevant.
He really does, always finding the next platform.
Okay, let's shift to phase 3, the mogul money and the mindset. This is the piece that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle, but it's so fundamental to his whole story. The fact that he was already a millionaire by the time he was 25. This was way before the giant Hollywood paycheck started rolling in.
Yeah, stop right there. A millionaire by 25. Before Conan, before Terminator. That just completely changes the narrative, doesn't it? It tells you his core skill maybe wasn't lifting weights or delivering one-liners. It was strategic financial thinking, investment, business building.
He talked about being a prolific goal setter. Right. Writing down his objectives on index cards every year. It seems like money, for him, was just this clear, measurable sign of success, and more importantly, the key to real freedom and control.
And he started with pure sweat equity. His first major business, launched with his bodybuilding buddy Franco Colombo back in '68, was a bricklaying company. Not exactly glamorous work.
But talk about timing.
Incredible timing. The business boomed because of all the rebuilding needed right after the big San Fernando earthquake in 1971.
So they had cash flow from that. And here's where you see that blueprint in action again, the constant reinvestment. He didn't just bank the bricklaying money. They immediately used those profits to start their next thing, a mail-order business, selling fitness equipment workout guides, capitalizing directly on his growing fame in the bodybuilding world.
It's that constant leveling up, rolling profits into the next bigger venture. That's the signature move. He took the money from the mail-order business, plus his contest winnings, and plowed it into his first real estate deal, an apartment building. Bought for just $10,000 down, apparently.
Wow, so why was that apartment building such a smart first step in real estate?
Because it wasn't just buying property, it was buying an income stream. He used leverage, borrowed money to buy an asset that immediately started paying him back through rent. So here he is in his early 20s, basically learning how to be a landlord, dealing with tenants, fixing things, understanding debt and equity. That's a hands-on financial education most Hollywood stars never get. They just cash the checks. He was building wealth actively.
And that one building grew into a whole portfolio, right? Commercial properties, residential, all over. This was generating millions for him long before he was commanding huge movie salaries. He was building financial independence brick by brick, deed by deed. That meant he could negotiate harder in Hollywood later or walk away.
Exactly. It gave him power. And that independence let him think bigger picture. Look at the mentors he cited. It's such a fascinating mix. Milton Friedman, the hardcore free market economist. Donald Trump, the real estate guy. Les Wexner, the retail genius behind Victoria's Secret and The Limited. And Warren Buffett, the ultimate value investor. It shows he wasn't tied to one ideology. He was just hungry for knowledge about how money works from anyone who'd mastered it.
It definitely fueled that confidence, maybe even that famous joke he made. Money doesn't make you happy. I now have $50 million, but I was just as happy when I had $48 million. It's funny, but it hints that the process of building it was the real kick for him, not just having the pile of cash.
And we should mention Planet Hollywood, too. High-profile investment with Stallone and Bruce Willis. Very 90s. But ultimately, it didn't last for him. He got out in 2000, said it taught him a valuable lesson. Knowing when to get out. Recognizing when something's peaked or just not working anymore is just as crucial as knowing when to jump in.
He's still very much involved in the fitness world commercially, though. He owns the Arnold Sports Festival, held every year in Columbus, Ohio. It's huge, probably the second biggest bodybuilding event globally after the Olympia. And estimates of his total net worth now range anywhere up to maybe $800 million. It's just a staggering financial success story, built alongside but also kind of separate from the Hollywood fame.
Completely separate foundation.
Which brings us to phase 4, the governor, politics, and policy. Okay, this leap. From global action star to running California, the biggest state in the U.S. It feels like the most audacious move of all. But the seeds of his political identity were actually planted the minute he landed in America.
That's right. He registered as a Republican way back in 1968, and he was always very clear why. He connected with what he saw as the Republican ideals of free enterprise, less government interference, lower taxes. He said the Democratic platforms back in the 60s reminded him too much of the Austrian socialism he felt he'd escaped from. That bureaucracy, that conformity.
So that core belief in individualism, maybe smaller government, was there from the start. He started getting more involved nationally in the late 80s and then got appointed chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports under George H.W. Bush. Bush apparently nicknamed him Conan the Republican.
Yeah, and a really telling early moment was when he introduced Milton Friedman's TV series, Free to Choose, back in 1990. He gave this passionate speech about how individualism is fundamentally incompatible with socialism and praised America for letting people chase their dreams without the government breathing down your neck. That strong libertarian streak really defined his political entry point.
And then fast forward to August 2003. The world is watching The Tonight Show, and boom, he announces he's running for governor of California. In the middle of this chaotic recall election targeting the Democratic governor, the media went nuts. The governor was born instantly.
He had zero prior elected office experience. None. But that massive fame, that unique brand he'd built, it just cut through all the usual political noise. Then got reelected pretty comfortably in 2006 with almost 56%. Served right through until 2011.
And he positioned himself as a moderate Republican, right? Fiscally conservative, but more liberal on social issues. The sources seem to bear that out. He supported gay rights early on, even officiated a same-sex wedding. But then, controversially, he vetoed bills that would have legalized same-sex marriage statewide in 2005 and 2007, pointing to court decisions. And he also vetoed single-payer health care bills twice, sticking to that fiscal conservatism.
He definitely shook things up with his style, too. Remember him calling the Democratic state legislators girly men? That got huge attention, building off a Saturday Night Live skit. But here's where the story gets really interesting and maybe contradictory. His biggest, most lasting policy achievements seem to fly directly in the face of that Milton Friedman small government ideology he started with.
You're talking about his environmental record.
Absolutely. The guy who champions free markets and rails against government overreach became one of the biggest champions of large-scale, government-driven climate action in the country. The tension there is fascinating.
Like AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, that was huge.
Monumental. It created the first statewide cap on greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. Then he followed up with an executive order demanding an 80% cut in emissions below 1990 levels by 2050. These aren't small tweaks. These are massive regulatory frameworks requiring significant government oversight and intervention.
And he wasn't just signing bills, was he? He became this really visible advocate for clean energy, famously converted some of his own Hummers to run on hydrogen and biofuels. He pushed for the California Hydrogen Highway Network, signed an order to get hydrogen fueling stations built. That's a big, expensive, state-led infrastructure project.
And even after leaving office, he kept at it. Founded R20 Regions of Climate Action, this global group pushing for local and regional governments to lead on climate solutions. It really shows that when a goal, in this case, tackling climate change, became his priority, he seemed willing to jettison parts of his earlier ideology. He went for the most effective tool, even if it meant embracing big government policies he might have rejected in theory before.
But his time as governor wasn't all smooth sailing. There were definitely some major controversies that the sources highlight.
Two big ones stand out. First, those allegations of sexual misconduct that surfaced during the 2003 campaign. 6 women came forward with claims. At the time, he gave this sort of qualified apology for having behaved badly sometimes, but denied many specifics. It wasn't until much later, in 2023, that he really addressed it more fully, publicly admitting he was totally wrong for his past behavior. It shows a long evolution in his public accountability on that front.
And the second major one was the commutation scandal right at the end of his term.
Yeah, literally hours before leaving office. He commuted the prison sentence for voluntary manslaughter for Esteban Núñez. Núñez was the son of a very powerful political ally, Fabian Núñez. Arnold cut the sentence from 16 years down to 7, calling the original sentence excessive.
The controversy wasn't just the commutation itself, which governors can do, but how he did it, right?
Exactly. He didn't inform the victim's family beforehand, which caused enormous outrage and led to lawsuits. A judge later looked at it and basically said Schwarzenegger's action showed an abuse of discretion and was repugnant, but ultimately it fell within his executive powers. Still, it was a really damaging episode, politically and ethically. Showed the complicated nature of political favors, maybe.
And his political voice definitely hasn't faded since leaving office. He's been very outspoken recently. Condemned white supremacists after the Charlottesville events in 2016. And after the January 6th Capitol attack, he released this really powerful video message, drew on his own family history with Nazism, compared the rioters to groups like the Proud Boys, and just bluntly called Donald Trump a failed leader, the worst president ever.
He definitely hasn't shied away from taking strong stances. And of course, we have to mention the ultimate political ceiling for him, the U.S. Constitution. Because he wasn't born in the U.S., he can't run for president. There was that whole Amend for Arnold push back in the day, trying to change the natural born citizen clause, but that never went anywhere.
Right, the ultimate ambition may be forever out of reach.
Perhaps.
Okay, let's move into our final phase, phase 5, personal life, health, and lasting legacy. This part really brings home maybe the personal cost of that kind of relentless, massive ambition. We have to talk about the end of his marriage to Maria Shriver, after 25 years, a member of the Kennedy dynasty.
Yeah, they separated in 2011, though the divorce wasn't finalized until 10 years later in 2021. And the catalyst, the reason it all fell apart, was the public revelation that he had fathered a son, Joseph Baena, more than 14 years earlier. The mother was Mildred Patricia Baena, who had worked for their family for a long time.
And the timeline the sources lay out is just incredibly painful when you think about the family dynamics. Mildred Baena was pregnant at the exact same time Maria Shriver was pregnant with their youngest child. Joseph was born just 5 days after Christopher, Shriver's youngest.
It's deeply sensitive stuff. Schwarzenegger himself said it took him 7 or 8 years to put it together when Joseph started to really resemble him. He eventually told Maria after she confronted him directly. He's spoken about the regret publicly since then, saying in 2014 that the mistakes he made that caused my family pain and split us up were the things he was least proud of. It's a stark reminder that huge public triumphs can have devastating private consequences.
We also need to talk about his health. I mean, given the extreme physical demands of bodybuilding, maybe it's not surprising he's faced some challenges. It started with a heart condition he was born with, right?
Yeah, a congenital issue called a bicuspid aortic valve. Basically, the valve that controls blood flow out of the heart only had 2 flaps, or leaflets, instead of the normal 3.
And that led to some serious surgeries later in life.
Quite a few. He had his first heart valve replacement back in 1997. Then in 2018, he needed emergency open heart surgery to replace that failing valve. And then again in 2020, he had another surgery for a new aortic valve. So multiple major heart procedures. Despite all that, he still maintains this incredibly active lifestyle. It's like that same discipline he forged as a teenager just carries through everything.
And that physical discipline seems to have influenced his diet recently too, connecting back to his environmental work. Sources say that as of 2022, he'd been eating about 80% plant-based for 5 years, citing both his health and the environment as reasons.
Yeah, he's really pushing that message now. He did that less meat, less heat campaign, trying to get people to cut down on meat to fight climate change. And he executive produced that documentary, The Game Changers, in 2018, which profiles successful athletes who eat plant-based diets, using his platform again.
When you look at his legacy, the symbols are everywhere, aren't they? There's literally a statue of him 8 feet tall, bronze, hitting that famous twisted double biceps pose. It stands in Columbus, Ohio, where he hosts his Arnold Sports Festival every year.
And you can't forget the vehicles. They almost perfectly capture his contradictions. He actually shipped his old Austrian Army M47 Patton tank over to the U.S. back in the 90s, paid $20,000 for it. Now he uses it for charity events, crushing things for kids.
Hilarious.
At the same time, he was famously the first civilian to buy a Humvee, the H1 model, pure excess. But then later, he had 3 of his Hummers custom converted to run on things like hydrogen, vegetable oil, biodiesel. It's that blend again, the symbol of massive consumption, right alongside the passionate environmentalist.
And the perfect recent anecdote that shows he's still making headlines just happened early in 2024. He got detained briefly by customs in Munich, Germany.
Right! For what? For not declaring a fancy Swiss watch an Audemars Piguet.
But why did he have the watch?
To auction it off for his climate initiative. So even when he's caught up in some minor bureaucratic snag, it ends up circling back to one of his major life themes and generates global news. The guy just commands attention still across all these different chapters of his life.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. This massive, almost unbelievable life story. We started with this kid from post-war Austria, driven by a difficult childhood, who literally built himself into an international icon through sheer will and barbells.
Then used that physical presence to overcome huge resistance in Hollywood, becoming a global superstar. But crucially, before that peak fame, he'd already mastered business and built serious financial independence.
And then the final act so far, converting that celebrity wattage into real political power, becoming governor of California.
The real thread, the genius maybe, wasn't just the ambition itself. It was his almost uncanny ability to turn that ambition into a concrete plan, a blueprint. And this is key, his willingness to completely reinvent himself, his methods, even his core beliefs, whenever the next big goal required it. Bodybuilding, acting, politics, they were all just vehicles for the next conquest.
We really saw that tension in the governor phase, didn't we? The guy who idolized Milton Friedman's free market ideas becomes the governor, pushing huge government-led environmental regulations like the Global Warming Solutions Act.
Exactly. It seems like achieving the objective, in that case, fighting climate change in California, mattered more to him than sticking rigidly to an abstract political philosophy he'd held earlier.
He wasn't trapped by needing to be consistent. He was driven by getting the result. And maybe that adaptability, that willingness to make radical shifts, is the real secret sauce in his blueprint.
It certainly seems like a core element.
And that really brings us to our final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. When you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger's incredible, multi-layered success story, where do you think the real key lies? Was it in sticking to that fierce self-discipline and the consistent ideology he often talked about early on? Or was his true superpower actually his willingness to ditch old philosophies, to undergo these radical transformations, physical, political, personal, whenever a new, bigger goal demanded a completely new version of Arnold?